Hello, welcome to this super short week. It's Thanksgiving on Thursday. Although if your family's anything like mine, it's going to look a little bit different this year, but I am still pumped because I like to have a day to look forward to, so I'm looking forward to Thursday this week. I believe in last week's video I said that this week I'm going to talk about the Third Amendment, but I'm going to push that back to next week, and instead I wanted to ask you guys a few questions about how everything's going with this class, and then I'm going to show you a quick preview to the Fourth Amendment. So when I'm teaching in person, I can generally gauge what my students get and what they're still really confused about. Because while I'm teaching, if you guys are over me talking about it, I get, okay, Miss Griffin, okay, we got this. Are you serious? Are you still asking? And if you don't get it, then I get those blank, what the heck are you referring to faces. And so I sometimes can tell, if you've noticed in the past few Edpuzzles, I've put in some questions that maybe were requiring you to look back to something we've discussed before, but I haven't had a way to find out what you guys truly understand. I don't really know that testing works that well, because we don't know that tests actually show what you've learned. And then also, if you take a test at this point, you have the internet at your fingertips. So am I really testing your knowledge and your understanding, or am I testing your ability to Google things? And with that being said, some of you might really grasp or really understand things, but you're not the best with multiple choice in the form of Google Forms, or maybe you're not the best writer. And so in your critical thinking questions, you're not able to demonstrate to me that you get it. And so I'm really missing that kind of face-to-face conversation. And so I'm hoping that you can give me some feedback with this Edpuzzle. And then let's take a look at what we have covered this year. So if you go to Google Classroom, you can take a look at all the topics that we've covered. We started with origins of government, and then we moved up to independence and the Articles of Confederation, the Declaration of Independence. And so we talked more about the historical aspect. Before we got into the Constitution, I went over all of the articles individually, week by week. We talked about the debate between Federalists and Anti-Federalists. We took a break to talk about the elections. Now we're tackling the Bill of Rights. And so we spent a week on the First Amendment, we spent a week on the Second Amendment, and then looking forward, next week will be the Third and Fourth. I think we then have the Fifth, Sixth, and Seventh before we come back for after winter break. I lied. I just checked my lesson plans. We're going to end with the Fifth this year, and then when we come back in January, we'll start with the Sixth and Seventh Amendment. But anyway, when it comes to all of these topics that we've covered, I want to know, what do you feel like you really got a grasp on, and what are you still kind of like, what is she talking about? What's going on? All right, next week I'm going to talk about the Third Amendment and the Fourth Amendment. And so this week I wanted to give you a brief Fourth Amendment preview. And hey, if you are going to be seeing people on Thanksgiving, go ahead and bring along your pocket Constitution. If someone tries to bring up religion or politics, which we've always been taught you do not discuss at the dinner table, you can have the Constitution to back you up. This week, let me intro you to the Fourth Amendment. It's on page 22, and it says, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the places to be searched and the persons or things to be seized." Next week, when I talk to you about the Third and Fourth Amendment, I'm going to talk a little bit about how the Fourth Amendment has been ever-changing with social media and cell phones. But this week, I'm going to let Craig from Crash Course get you a little hip to the amendment, and he'll talk about how it relates to you in school and at home.
Hi, I'm Craig, and this is Crash Course Government and Politics, and today we're going to continue our discussion of the Bill of Rights and talk about something that may actually be useful to you. We're going to talk about when the police are allowed to search your house, your car, and even you. But not me. I have immunity. I'm on YouTube. Right? Is that how it works, Dan? It's not how it works? I'm in trouble. You might think that this only matters if you are, a criminal, and if you are, then you should be paying close attention. But even if you haven't committed any crimes and you are unlucky enough to be stopped by the police, these protections apply. The question of when and where and how the police can conduct a search falls under the general topic of criminal procedure. In this case, the second word is important. The courts usually look at how the police are acting, and the protections courts have supported are primarily procedural. What this means is that there is no unlimited, sometimes called substantive, right to have the police not search you or your home. The criminal procedure civil liberties are found in the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments, but today we're only going to look at the 4th Amendment, which reads, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized." You can see right away that this is not an absolute right. The framers made sure that we are only protected from unreasonable searches and seizures, and they added that the police are supposed to get a warrant before they search you. Let's start with a warrant requirement because it's kind of confusing. A search warrant is a piece of paper issued by a judge authorizing law enforcement officers to search something, usually your house, but possibly your car or your person or your desk eagle. I'm not hiding anything in there. What? According to the 4th Amendment, for the police to get a judge to issue a warrant, they must have probable cause, which is more than just a suspicion or an anonymous tip. Although sometimes judges will issue warrants on pretty flimsy probable cause. When they are issued, warrants are supposed to be specific, laying out what the police are searching for and where they expect to find it. This means that if the warrant says the police can search your garage for a stolen car, they can't look in your kitchen drawers and cupboards because A, the warrant says they can search your garage, and B, they're looking for a car, and you can't hide a car in your kitchen drawers unless it's a very small car. I drive a Prius, which is pretty small, but it doesn't fit in my kitchen drawers. I've tried. Even when I take the whisk out. You'll notice that I qualified my statement about warrants. You do this a lot when you're talking about criminal procedure. I said, when they are issued. Despite the fact that the 4th Amendment seems to say that the police always need a warrant, the courts have ruled that it is not always required for the police to engage in a reasonable search. What this means is that if the police have probable cause to search you, say they catch you pocketing powdered donuts in the grocery store, they don't always need to go to the judge to search you. What makes a reasonable search is a question that the courts have wrestled with. Sometimes, like with a stolen car in the kitchen cabinet, it's pretty obvious. But many times it isn't. For example, if the warrant allows the police to search your kitchen for illegal hand grenades and they look in your freezer and find illegal drugs instead, that's probably reasonable because freezers are where most people store their illegal hand grenades. And also their drugs. And if the police stop you for speeding, which is a violation of traffic laws, also known as a crime, and then search your car and find a dead body in the trunk, the courts have ruled that this is reasonable too. It's important to realize that the warrant and reasonableness requirements are not meant to prevent the police from stopping criminals caught in the act. If the police, after chasing a masked man carrying a bag with a dollar sign on it, running away from a bank that has just been reported robbed by a man with a gun and a mask, manage to catch him, they don't need an arrest warrant to take him into custody. And because the running away and the bag of money are pretty suggestive, the police will have probable cause to search the guy, who in my mind looks like the Hamburglar, for the gun. Then the question is, can they use the gun as evidence? Let's go to the thought bubble. One of the most important Supreme Court cases dealing with searches and seizures is Mapp versus Ohio, decided in 1961. The facts of the case are pretty wild. The police went to the home of Dalry Mapp to search for explosives and gambling equipment. They didn't have a warrant, so she didn't let them in. They came back a bit later with a fake warrant and searched the house. They didn't find explosives or gambling equipment, but they did find a trunk full of pornography, which was illegal at the time, so they arrested her. The main evidence against her, naturally, was the pornography, but the cops' probable cause was to search for explosives. The court ruled that the evidence had been seized through an illegal search. There was no warrant, and even if there had been one, it probably wouldn't have included the trunk in which they found the porn. More important, they ruled that this evidence, and any evidence seized pursuant to an illegal search, cannot be used against a defendant in a trial. This is called an exclusionary rule. Unlawfully obtained evidence is excluded from the trial, and it's sometimes called the fruit of the poison tree, possibly because lawyers are better at naming things than historians are. This is incredibly important, especially for cop shows on TV, but also for you if you happen to have your home searched illegally and the police find evidence of criminal activity. Thanks, Thought Bubble. So it seems like there are some pretty strong protections against the police searching your home because of Mapp, but there are also plenty of exceptions, and no, we're not talking about the Mongols. Many of these exceptions involve your car. In general, the courts have been very lenient when police search your car, probably because very often when they pull you over, it's because of some kind of moving violation, like speeding, which can be probable cause, especially if they think you might be speeding away from a crime. The court decisions on this issue are really complicated, but the general rule of thumb is that the police can usually search your car, and you, if they pull you over, despite what Jay-Z may think. Another question that comes up is random traffic stops to check for drunk driving. A breathalyzer is a type of search, so it would seem that the police should have probable cause to stop you and check to see if you're drunk. But the courts have ruled that drunk driving checkpoints are okay, assuming they don't disproportionately target people of a specific race, but that's for another episode. While we're talking about cars and specific groups of people, I should probably add that there's one group of people who don't have the same protections against searches: students. Students often think that it's not okay for school officials to search their lockers or their book bags, but those students are wrong. Most students go to public schools, where the officials are mostly government workers and are subject to the Bill of Rights. The courts have ruled that students don't have the same protections as other citizens, and that the interests of the state in keeping a safe, drug, and weapon-free educational environment trumps their privacy interests. Although there are limits to how intrusive these searches can be. Drug tests for student athletes? Fine. Strip searches? Not okay. And BT dubs, in the same way that a breathalyzer test is a search, so is a drug test, or as they say in England, a drugs test, which is probably a more accurate way to say it because they usually test more than one drug. These can seem pretty intrusive, but the courts usually rule that they are okay, especially where public safety is concerned. The state interest in drug-free schools is a pretty strong one, but the cases on student drug tests are really interesting, especially when they get into the issue of whether schools can test all students without probable cause, or only specific groups like athletes. If you're really interested, you should look these cases up. But why are you so interested? Maybe you should take a drug test. Or a drugs test. So I'm going to stop here before I get too deep in the weeds about search and seizures and the Fourth Amendment. There are two important things to remember. The first is that, like all the constitutional protections of civil liberties, it only applies to government agents. You have no Fourth Amendment protection against your parents searching your room. Unless your parents are police officers, and they're on duty, and it's like official police business. The second thing to remember is that the protections in the Fourth Amendment are far from absolute. The amendment itself includes a reasonableness standard, and what is reasonable, as well as when warrants are necessary, has been and continues to be determined by the courts. In this case, as with most civil liberties cases, the courts attempt to balance an individual's interest in maintaining her privacy against the state's interest in preventing crime and keeping citizens safe. It's not an easy balance, but that's what makes the issue complex and interesting, at least to us here at Crash Course, because we're complex and interesting. Right, Stan? Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Okay, I hope he got you excited for learning about the Fourth Amendment. Just as a recap, this is the only assignment that's due this week. When you mark Turn-In on Google Classroom, it's not going to have a grade right away because I have to go back and read all of your responses. And then once I read your responses, those questions will be graded. And obviously, there's no right or wrong answer. I'm just asking for your feedback on some of these questions. Please continue to reach out. I am going to try my hardest not to check my computer on Thursday or Friday of this week, but I am available up until Wednesday, and then we'll be back at school on Monday. I hope. I'm not going to lie. I'm getting a little concerned that we won't be back. I know some of you have been asking, and at this point, I don't really know. I'm actually recording this on Tuesday, November 17th. And so at this point, I know Licking Heights has gone virtual for the week, and I believe Southwest Licking may be going virtual soon. So hopefully here at CTAC, it seems like we've been handling everything really well, and this hybrid schedule is working. So I really do hope to see you all, or those of you who I do see, on Monday. So let's keep those good vibes coming. Keep wearing your masks. And there's the bell. Class is over.